Hello! Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and theories. Tonight, we're diving into something a bit darker than usual. Stranger Things. 5 death predictions. Now, growing up with this show since 2016, I honestly didn't know how emotionally invested I'd become in these characters. But here we are, 8 years later, talking about who might not make it out of Hawkins alive. The Duffer Brothers have proven they're not afraid to break our hearts. And with the final season coming, we know someone's dying. Probably multiple someones. Tonight we'll be covering the major characters who might meet their end, the patterns the show has established, and honestly, some theories that have kept me up at night. If you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon, linked in the description down below. But for now, grab your blankets and flashlights, get cozy in the upside down, and let's begin. So way before we can predict who's dying in Season 5, we need to understand the Duffer Brothers' established patterns for killing off characters. Because there is a pattern, whether we want to admit it or not. From the very first season, Stranger Things taught us that no one is truly safe, but some people are safer than others. Let's start with Season 1, where we lost 2 characters that set the tone for everything that followed, Barb Holland and Benny Hammond. Benny was killed off in the very first episode, which honestly caught everyone off guard. He seemed like he might be a recurring character, someone who'd help Eleven throughout the series. But no, the show established immediately that likability doesn't equal plot armor. Then there's Barb, who disappeared at the end of episode 1 and was confirmed dead by episode 3. Barb became this massive cultural phenomenon, a symbol of the show's willingness to kill characters we'd just started to care about. Of course, she also became the internet's most mourned character, sparking the whole "Justice for Barb" movement. But here's the thing about those deaths. They were both secondary characters, not part of the core group of kids. That's the pattern that started in Season 1, and honestly, has continued throughout the entire show. The Duffer Brothers protect the original kids while picking off everyone around them. Season 2 gave us Bob Newby, and I've got to say, his death still hurts. Bob was introduced as Joyce's new boyfriend, this sweet, nerdy Radio Shack manager who just wanted to help. The show spent the entire season making us love him. His terrible jokes, his genuine kindness, his relationship with Will and Jonathan. He became a fan favourite so quickly. And then, right when we thought he'd made it out of the lab safely, the Demodogs got him. It was brutal, it was heartbreaking, and it established another pattern. The show will introduce a new character, make them absolutely beloved, and then kill them by season's end. Bob's death also showed us that the Duffer Brothers would give characters heroic moments right before they died. Bob literally saved everyone in that lab. He was the superhero Joyce said he was. And then, he was gone. We weren't ready. Season 3 brought us Billy Hargrove's redemptive death, and what we thought was Hopper's death, which turned out to be a fake-out, but we'll get to that. Billy's arc was fascinating because he'd been the villain in Season 2. He was abusive, racist, and genuinely terrifying. But Season 3 peeled back layers, showing us his own abuse at the hands of his father. It didn't excuse his behaviour, but it explained it. And then in the final episode, Billy sacrificed himself to save Eleven and the others from the Mind Flayer. It was a classic redemptive villain death, and it worked beautifully. The show made us care about Billy right before it killed him. As for Hopper, his apparent death at the end of Season 3 devastated everyone. The emotional letter to Eleven, Joyce watching the explosion, the empty chair at Christmas. It was gutting. Of course, Season 4 revealed he'd survived and was imprisoned in Russia, which honestly felt a bit like the show couldn't commit to killing a main character. But more on that later. Season 4 gave us the most deaths yet, and honestly, it's where the Duffer Brothers really showed their hand. Eddie Munson followed the exact same pattern as Bob. New character introduced, immediately becomes beloved, dies by season's end. Eddie was brilliant, charismatic, and became a fan favourite within episodes. His death in the Upside Down, protecting Dustin and buying time for the others, was heroic and tragic, but it also felt inevitable once you recognise the pattern. The show loves to introduce a lovable outsider character who doesn't quite fit in, make us adore them, and then sacrifice them for the greater good. It's emotional manipulation, and it works every single time. Then there were Vecna's victims. Chrissy, Fred and Patrick were all killed in absolutely horrifying ways. The bone breaking, the eye gouging, the levitation. Vecna's curse was genuinely terrifying, and these deaths established him as the most brutal villain the show has had. And of course, there's Max. Max technically died. Her heart stopped. 11 brought her back, but Max is currently in a coma, blind with broken limbs. We'll talk more about her specifically later, but her near death in Season 4 set up what feels like an inevitable, actual death in Season 5. So what's the pattern? The Duffer Brothers protect the core group of kids. Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin and 11 have all survived 4 seasons despite constant danger. They've come close to death, especially Will and 11, but they're still here. The show instead kills off the people around them. Parental figures like Bob, new friends like Eddie, secondary characters like Barb. It's a pattern that creates a specific kind of dread. We know someone's dying in Season 5. We just don't know if the Duffer Brothers will finally break their own rule and kill one of the original kids, or if they'll continue the pattern and sacrifice the people those kids love. Based on the evidence, I'd say the latter is more likely. But that doesn't mean the core group is entirely safe. This pattern of protecting the core kids while sacrificing those around them creates a specific kind of dread. We know someone's dying. We just don't know who. Now that we've established the pattern, let's talk about the character everyone's worried about, Mike Wheeler. Let's talk about Mike Wheeler, and honestly, I never thought I'd be putting him on a death prediction list. Mike is one of the original 4 boys, the heart of the group in Season 1, the leader who brought everyone together. He's also Elle's boyfriend and Nancy's little brother. He's got so many narrative connections that killing him would create massive ripple effects throughout the entire cast. But here's the thing. Mike has been kind of sidelined in recent seasons, particularly Season 4. His character development has stagnated, while Will, Lucas and Dustin have all had significant growth and their own storylines. Mike has become somewhat passive. He's often just reacting to what Elle or the others are doing, rather than driving his own story. And in television, when a character stops growing, that can be a death flag. Evidence for Mike's death is honestly kind of compelling, even though I don't want to admit it. Finn Wolfhard has been pretty open in interviews about being ready for the show to end, so he can pursue other projects. He's got a music career, he's doing films, and he's clearly outgrown Stranger Things in some ways. That's not unusual, obviously. All these kids are adults now and want to move on. But it does make you wonder if the Duffer Brothers might write him out permanently. There's also the Will situation. Will is in love with Mike, something that became increasingly obvious in Season 4. His painting, the emotional speech he gave to Mike, pretending it was from Elle, the looks. Will's entire emotional arc is tied to Mike, and Mike is completely oblivious. If Mike died, it would be absolutely devastating for Will. It would also give Will a massive emotional storyline for Season 5, dealing with grief over someone he loved who never knew. Then there's the vulnerability factor. Mike has struggled with self-worth and feeling like he's not special or important compared to Elle and the others. That kind of psychological wound is exactly what makes someone vulnerable to Vecna's curse. Max was vulnerable because of her grief and guilt over Billy. Chrissy was vulnerable because of her mother's abuse and her eating disorder. If Vecna targets Mike, he's got plenty of trauma to work with. Mike's fear of inadequacy, his guilt over not being able to protect his friends, his complicated feelings about Elle's powers. It's all there, but honestly, I don't think Mike is dying. Of course, that could be wishful thinking on my part, but there's strong evidence against it too. Mike is too connected to too many characters. Killing him would devastate Elle, Nancy, Holly, Karen, Ted. Okay, maybe not Ted. Will, Lucas, Dustin, and basically everyone. His death would dominate season 5 to the point where it might overshadow the actual plot of defeating Vecna and closing the Upside Down. The show has worked hard to keep the focus on the supernatural threat, and Mike's death would shift everything to grief and trauma processing. Additionally, Mike is the character who's been there since the very beginning. He found Elle in the woods. He hid her in his basement. He's the one who said, "Friends don't lie," and established the core theme of the show. Killing him would feel like killing the show's emotional foundation. There's also the fact that Mike's character has been underdeveloped in recent seasons, which could mean the opposite of a death flag. It could mean the Duffer Brothers are saving his character development for season 5. Maybe we'll finally get Mike's big moment, his chance to be the hero and the leader again. Maybe his confession to Elle in the season 4 finale was the beginning of his arc, not the end. I'd say Mike has about a 20% chance of dying. It's possible, especially if the Duffer Brothers want to shock everyone by killing an original kid, but it's not likely. Mike feels too central, too connected to everyone else. His death would create too many narrative consequences, but that doesn't mean he's entirely safe. Speaking of characters with massive narrative connections, we need to talk about Steve Harrington. Now, you can't talk about Stranger Things death predictions without mentioning the character everyone is terrified will die. Steve Harrington. And honestly, if I had to bet on one main character death, Steve would be at the top of my list. Here's why. Steve has completed one of the most satisfying character arcs in television history. He went from season 1 douchebag boyfriend to the beloved babysitter, the guy who protects the kids at all costs, the friend who's always there when you need him. He's become everyone's favourite character. And in television, when a character completes their arc that perfectly, when they've grown as much as they can grow, that's often when they die. Think about Steve's journey. He started as Nancy's popular boyfriend, a bit shallow, a bit mean to Jonathan. By the end of season 1, he'd already started his redemption. Season 2 gave us Steve and Dustin's friendship, one of the purest relationships in the show. Season 3 showed Steve working at Scoops Ahoy, being tortured by Russians, and developing his friendship with Robin. He came out as Robin's eternal platonic soulmate after she came out to him, which was a beautiful moment. Season 4 had Steve nearly dying multiple times. The Demobats in the Upside Down bit him, dragged him underwater, and he survived. But barely. He also had moments with Nancy that suggested unresolved feelings, which creates another complicated thread. But here's the thing. What's left for Steve? He's single. His romantic situations with both Nancy and Robin are resolved. Nancy's with Jonathan. Robin's gay and interested in Vicky. He's working a dead-end job. He's talked about wanting kids and a future that feels increasingly unlikely in a town plagued by supernatural disasters. His character arc feels complete. Of course, that's exactly why the Duffer Brothers might kill him. Joe Keery has a rising music career as DJ. He's doing other projects. While he seems to love Stranger Things, he's also clearly ready to move on. And the show has set up Steve as the ultimate hero. He's willing to sacrifice himself for the kids without hesitation. Season 4 practically wrote the blueprint for his death. Steve getting attacked by Demobats, Steve staying behind to fight while others escape, Steve being the protector. It would be so easy to give him a heroic sacrifice in season 5. He'd go out saving Dustin or Robin or Nancy or all the kids, and it would be devastating and beautiful, and everyone would cry. Peak television tragedy. No notes. But there's another element that makes Steve's death feel almost too obvious. The show knows we love him. The Duffer Brothers know we're all terrified of losing him, which means they might be doing exactly what they did with Hopper in season 3. Making us think he's dead, making us grieve, and then revealing he survived. Or they might subvert our expectations entirely and keep him alive because killing Steve feels too predictable at this point. Honestly, I can't decide which option is more likely. Steve's death would hurt. It would hurt a lot. But it would also make narrative sense, which is exactly why the Duffer Brothers might do it. I'd say Steve has about a 60% chance of dying, which is higher than any other main character, except possibly one other person we'll get to. That terrifies me. But if there's one character whose death feels almost inevitable, it's someone who's already technically died once. Let's talk about Max. Let's talk about Max Mayfield, and honestly, the fact that she survived Season 4 at all feels like borrowed time. Max had what should have been her ending in the Season 4 finale. Her arc in Season 4 was about grief, depression, and suicidal ideation after Billy's death. She was pulling away from her friends, isolating herself, consumed by guilt that she didn't save Billy, and maybe didn't want to. She was vulnerable to Vecna because of that trauma, and Vecna nearly killed her. Actually, he did kill her. Max died. Her heart stopped. Lucas watched her die in his arms, and then 11 from inside Max's mind somehow restarted her heart. But Max didn't wake up. She's currently in a coma, blind with broken limbs, and I think that's where her story ends. Here's why Max dying in Season 5 feels almost certain. First, she already had her goodbye episode. Dear Billy in Season 4 was a masterpiece. Max reading her letters to everyone, saying what she needed to say, then literally running for her life through her memories while running up that hill played. It was perfect. It was cathartic. It was her making peace with dying. And honestly, it should have been her ending. The fact that 11 brought her back felt a bit like the show couldn't commit to actually killing her. But here's the thing about bringing someone back from the dead. It doesn't erase what happened. Max is broken. She's blind. She's in a coma. Her limbs are shattered. Even if she wakes up, what kind of life does she have? The show has never been afraid of tragedy, and Max's current state is arguably crueler than death. Keeping her alive in Season 5, only to have her die anyway, feels like the most Duffer Brothers move possible. There's also the narrative cost of her survival. If Max wakes up, fully recovers, and goes back to being herself, then Season 4's climax loses all its weight. Vecna's victory is undone. The stakes are lowered. For Max's near death to matter, there has to be a permanent consequence. And the most permanent consequence is death. I think Max will die early in Season 5. Maybe in the first episode or two. Maybe she'll wake up briefly, have a moment with Lucas and the others, and then die. Or maybe she'll die without ever waking up, which would be even more tragic. Lucas would have to say goodbye to her twice, once when she died in his arms, and again when they finally let her go. Sadie Sink has also blown up career-wise since Season 4. She was incredible in The Whale and has loads of other projects. While she seems committed to Stranger Things, it's clear she's moving into more serious, awards-caliber work. And honestly, Max dying would be a hell of a final performance. The emotional weight of that character's ending would showcase Sink's range and give her a proper send-off. To be honest, I think Max already had her ending. The fact that she's still technically alive is just prolonging the inevitable. Her story was about grief and guilt and finding the strength to fight for one more day. She fought, she ran, she held on as long as she could. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the saddest ending is the one that's already happened. Just drawn out. She already died. Since we're on the topic of characters in danger, let's talk about someone whose death would absolutely shatter the entire group. Joyce Byers. Now let's talk about Joyce Byers, and I've got to say, this one feels different from the others. Joyce is the emotional centre of the entire show. The mother figure, not just for Will and Jonathan, but basically for everyone. She's the one who never gave up on Will in Season 1 when everyone else thought he was dead. She's the one who's fought through every season to protect her kids and the people she loves. And honestly, she's been through enough tragedy for one person. Losing Bob, losing Hopper, temporarily, watching Will suffer through possession and trauma. Joyce has endured so much that killing her feels a bit too cruel, even for the Duffer Brothers. But here's the counter-argument. Joyce is a tragedy magnet. Bad things happen to her constantly. And in storytelling, especially in horror, sometimes characters are built up just to be torn down. Joyce's death would be absolutely devastating. It would destroy Will and Jonathan. It would break Hopper, who's finally reunited with the woman he loves after a season in a Russian prison. Joyce dying right when she's supposed to get her happy ending would be peak Duffer Brothers emotional manipulation. And we know they're capable of it. Bob died right when he and Joyce seemed happy. Billy died right after we finally saw his humanity. The show loves to snatch away happiness at the last possible moment. There's also the practical consideration that Winona Ryder is a big star with a career outside Stranger Things. She's been brilliant in the show, but she's also done loads of other work, and Season 5 might be a natural endpoint for her involvement. Of course, Ryder has been vocal about loving the show and the cast, so it's not like she's desperate to leave. But still, availability and career considerations matter. Then again, Joyce feels protected by narrative mercy. She's suffered so much that killing her would feel excessive. The audience can only take so much tragedy before it stops being cathartic and starts being punishing. And Joyce dying would definitely cross that line. She deserves better. She deserves to survive, to be happy with Hopper, to see her sons grow up and heal from their trauma. Honestly, I don't think the Duffer Brothers would go there. Of course, I've been wrong before, but Joyce feels like one of the few characters who's genuinely safe. Not because she has plot armor, but because her death would serve no narrative purpose beyond cruelty. It wouldn't advance the story. It wouldn't defeat Vecna. It would just be pain for pain's sake. And Stranger Things, for all its darkness, has never been nihilistic. It's always maintained that hope and love and family matter. That fighting for the people you care about is worth it. Joyce embodies all of that. Killing her would undermine the show's core message. I'd say Joyce has about a 15% chance of dying. It's possible, especially if the Duffer Brothers want a truly shocking death, but unlikely. Joyce feels protected by narrative mercy. She's suffered enough. But in a show about monsters and darkness, mercy isn't guaranteed. Speaking of characters who've suffered, we need to talk about Will Byers, the boy this all started with. Let's talk about Will Byers, and honestly, there's something poetic about the possibility of his death. Will was patient zero. His disappearance in the very first episode kicked off the entire series. Where is Will became the driving question of Season 1. The show built its foundation on Will's suffering. He was trapped in the Upside Down, hunted by the Demogorgon, fighting to survive in a nightmare dimension while his friends and family desperately searched for him. He made it out, but he never really escaped. Season 2 had Will possessed by the Mind Flayer, his body used as a host for an interdimensional monster. Season 3 showed him still sensing the Upside Down, his connection never fully severed. And Season 4 finally gave us Will's emotional arc beyond trauma. His feelings for Mike, his sense of not belonging, his struggle to find himself while dealing with everything he's been through. Will's continued connection to the Upside Down makes him uniquely vulnerable. He can sense when Vecna is active. His neck tingles when the Upside Down is near. He's got what Owens called true sight, an ability to perceive things others can't. That connection has saved the group multiple times, but it also means Will is still tied to Vecna and the Mind Flayer in ways we don't fully understand. What if that connection can't be broken? What if the only way to truly close the Upside Down is to sever the link permanently? And what if that requires Will's death? There's a tragic symmetry to Will being the beginning and the end of the story. The boy who is taken would be the boy who's sacrificed, not because he has to be, but because he chooses to be, because that's who Will is. He's the one who told Mike not to put himself in danger, because you're the heart of the group. Will has always seen himself as less important than his friends, less special than Mike or Elle. If sacrificing himself could save everyone, I think he'd do it without hesitation. And honestly, that kind of selfless death would complete his arc in the most heartbreaking way possible. Will spent the entire series being the victim, the one who needed saving. Choosing his own death, making it mean something, would finally give him agency. Noah Schnapp has talked in interviews about Will's importance in Season 5. The Duffer Brothers have said that Will is central to the final season, that we're returning to the show's roots. That could mean Will gets his hero moment, or it could mean Will gets his tragic ending. I think Will dying would break my heart, more than any other character, except maybe Steve. Will deserves to be happy. He deserves to come out to Mike, to be accepted, to live his life beyond trauma and fear. But Stranger Things has never been about giving characters what they deserve. It's about survival and sacrifice and the cost of fighting monsters. To be honest, Will dying would break my heart. There's a chance, maybe 40%, that Will is the big death of Season 5, the boy who started it all, ending it all. It would bring the story full circle. Sometimes the most painful endings are the most satisfying. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth into every single character, since honestly, we'd be here all night. But let's cover some of the supporting cast quickly. Nancy Wheeler. Of all the supporting characters, Nancy might be in the most danger. She's the investigative journalist, constantly putting herself in harm's way to uncover the truth. She's also caught in a romantic triangle with Steve and Jonathan that needs resolution, and the easiest way to resolve a love triangle is to remove the person at the centre. Nancy's death would devastate both Steve and Jonathan, while also serving a narrative purpose. She's been positioned as a warrior throughout the series, wielding guns and fighting monsters with the same determination she brings to her journalism. That makes her a prime candidate for a heroic death. Natalia Dyer is also building a career outside Stranger Things, and her character arc feels relatively complete. I'd say Nancy has about a 50% chance of dying, which honestly makes me proper nervous. She's brilliant, she's brave, and that's exactly why she might not survive. Jonathan Byers. Honestly, Jonathan feels more expendable than most. His character has been sidelined in recent seasons. The whole California stoner arc in Season 4 didn't do him any favours, and his relationship with Nancy has been strained. He's Will and Elle's brother, Joyce's son, but narratively, he doesn't feel as essential as he once was. Jonathan dying would hurt Joyce and Will and Nancy, but it wouldn't derail the entire plot. I think Jonathan has maybe a 30% chance. He's not safe, but he's not the obvious choice either. Dustin Henderson. No, absolutely not. Dustin is too beloved, too essential to the group's dynamic. He's the heart and the comic relief. Killing Dustin would be too cruel, especially after Eddie's death already devastated him. The show has put Dustin through enough. Watching Eddie die, dealing with that grief, having to tell Eddie's uncle what happened. Dustin has earned his survival. I'd give him maybe a 5% chance, and that's only if the Duffer Brothers want to emotionally destroy their entire audience. Lucas Sinclair. Lucas has grown so much, especially in Season 4. His relationship with Max, his basketball storyline, his struggle between fitting in and being himself. He's already watching Max die once. Making him go through that again and then killing him too would be excessive. Lucas feels protected by the same pattern that's kept all the original kids alive. Maybe a 10% chance. Erica Sinclair. She's a kid, and Stranger Things hasn't killed any of the core kid characters yet. Erica is also fantastic, sassy and smart and brave, but she's younger than the others, and her death would serve no purpose beyond trauma. I'd say she's got less than 5% chance. The show won't go there. Robin Buckley. I love Robin. Her coming out scene with Steve was one of the show's best moments. She's funny, she's brilliant, and she brings something special to the dynamic. But Robin is also a newer character, without the same protection as the originals. She's completed her main character arc, which was coming out and finding acceptance. That could make her vulnerable. Maya Hawke also has a music career and other acting projects. I think Robin has maybe a 25% chance. Not likely, but possible if they need another heartbreaking death beyond Steve. Murray Bauman. Oh, Murray is dying. I'd put money on it. He's the lovable comic relief character who isn't part of the core group. He's been helpful, he's been funny, but he's also expendable. Murray getting a heroic death, probably involving explosives or vodka or both, feels almost certain. I'd say 70% chance. R.E.P. Murray. Argyle's too minor, too much of a comic relief character. The show won't kill him. He'll probably stay in California making pizza and living his best life. Maybe 5% chance. The supporting cast has a mixed bag of survival odds. Some feel protected, others feel like they're wearing red shirts. But talking about who dies isn't quite as interesting as talking about how they might die. Let's discuss the methods. Let's talk about the actual death mechanics. Because honestly, Vecna's curse is one of the most terrifying ways to die in television. We've seen it 4 times now. Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, and Max. Each time, it's the same horrifying process. Vecna enters their mind, traps them in their worst memories and trauma, and then, if they can't escape, he breaks them from the inside out. The levitation, the bone snapping, the eyes. It's visceral and brutal and deeply psychological. That combination of mental torture and physical destruction is what makes Vecna such an effective villain. He doesn't just kill you, he makes you experience your worst fears first. So who else might be vulnerable to Vecna's curse? The established criteria is trauma, guilt, and emotional wounds. Max was vulnerable because of her guilt over Billy, Chrissy because of her mother's abuse, Fred because of guilt over a car accident. Anyone with significant trauma is potentially a target, which honestly includes almost every main character at this point. Mike with his self-worth issues, Will with his lifetime of suffering, Nancy with survivor's guilt and the weight of responsibility she carries, Steve with his fear of inadequacy and loneliness, even Dustin dealing with Eddie's death. They're all carrying psychological wounds that Vecna could exploit. The question is whether Vecna will stick with his established method or develop new powers in Season 5. There's also the Upside Down itself as a killing environment. We've seen how dangerous it is. The vines that can strangle you, the toxic particles in the air, the creatures, demogorgons, demodogs, demobats. Any of these could kill a character, especially in a final battle scenario. Season 4 showed us that the Upside Down is deteriorating, crumbling, and that instability might create new dangers, collapsing structures, rifts opening, reality breaking down. Then there's the question of sacrifice mechanics. Closing the Upside Down might require a life. We've seen this pattern in other shows. Someone has to stay behind. Someone has to channel enough power or hold a gate open or seal themselves in. Elle has been the one to close gates before, but what if this time it costs more than just her powers? What if closing Vecna's gates requires a death? It's personal. The methods matter because they tell us about the stakes and the tone of Season 5. Vecna's psychological torture deaths are intimate and cruel. They hurt to watch because we see the victim's worst moments laid bare. But there could also be heroic sacrifice deaths, characters choosing to die to save others. Those hit differently. They're sad but cathartic, painful but meaningful. Or there could be sudden, brutal deaths in battle. No ceremony, no goodbye, just gone. Those are the ones that feel most unfair, most shocking. However the deaths happen, they'll be painful. The Duffer Brothers don't do mercy kills. Since we're on the topic of deaths, let's talk about the emotional manipulation tactics the show uses. Now let's talk about one of Stranger Things' most effective strategies, making us love characters right before they die. The Eddie Munson formula is perfect for this. Season 4 introduced Eddie in the first episode, and within 3 episodes, he was a fan favourite. His Metallica performance, his friendship with Dustin, his fear and bravery and humanity. We loved Eddie, and then the show killed him in the most heroic way possible. giving him a guitar solo in the Upside Down before sacrificing himself to save everyone. We saw it coming. If we're honest, the pattern was there, but we fell for it anyway. That's the genius of the manipulation. Even when you recognize the formula, it still works. Bob Newby followed the same pattern in season 2. Sweet, nerdy Bob, who just wanted to make Joyce happy, who helped figure out Will's map, who talked about moving to Maine, who became a superhero when he cleared the lab's security systems. We loved Bob, and then he died. Billy Hargrove got a redemptive arc in season 3, letting us see his humanity and his abuse before he sacrificed himself for Elle. Max's Dear Billy episode in season 4 was a masterclass in farewell storytelling, giving her a complete emotional arc in case she died, which she technically did. The pattern is clear. Big emotional moments, character development, humanizing scenes, and then death. So what does this mean for season 5 predictions? Watch for characters who suddenly get loads of screen time and emotional development. If Steve has a heartfelt conversation with Dustin about growing up and moving on, start the funeral arrangements. Peak Duffer Brothers manipulation. No notes. If Will gets a coming out scene with Mike and they have a beautiful moment of acceptance and friendship, be worried. If Nancy writes a letter to her family or has a moment where she talks about her future, that's a death flag. The show telegraphs its deaths through emotional setup, and honestly, once a character gets a big emotional speech, I start worrying. Of course, we fall for it every time. We know the pattern, but we let ourselves care anyway. That's what makes good storytelling. The manipulation is part of the experience. We want to feel things, even when those feelings hurt. Season 5 will use every emotional trick in the book. The question is, will we see it coming? Speaking of seeing things coming, there are some production clues we can examine. Let's talk about the meta-evidence, the stuff happening off-screen that might reveal who's dying. Actor social media posts have been interesting. Some of the cast has been posting nostalgic content, throwback photos, emotional messages about the show ending. Of course, that could just be normal sentimentality about a show that's been their lives for nearly a decade. Or it could be goodbye. Finn Wolfhard, Sadie Sink, and Joe Keery have all been notably emotional in interviews about season 5. That could mean nothing, or it could mean everything. Then there's the filming schedule. Actors who wrap early from production might indicate their characters die early in the season. But the show is so secretive about this, and honestly, they film multiple endings and fake scenes to prevent leaks. The Duffer Brothers learned from Game of Thrones spoiler issues. They're not taking chances. There have been a few on-set photos that circulated online, but nothing definitive. Some cast members were spotted filming together in certain locations, which sparked theories about who survives to the end. But again, it's all speculation. Interviews have given us small hints. The Duffer Brothers have said season 5 will be their most emotional yet. They've mentioned that it's a love letter to the fans and to the characters. They've also said they're not afraid to make bold choices. Actors have been told to prepare emotionally for the final season. Noah Schnapp has said Will is central to season 5. Millie Bobby Brown has talked about Elle's arc coming full circle. David Harbour has mentioned Hopper finally getting closure. Whether any of that closure involves death remains to be seen. I've been watching their interviews like a hawk, honestly. Looking for slips, for tells, for moments where someone almost says too much and catches themselves. It's probably unhealthy. Or maybe I'm reading tea leaves. I don't know. Production clues are tricky. They could be misdirection. The show might be intentionally leaking false information or letting actors post things to throw us off. But they're all we have until the episodes drop. Something feels off. Now to add some context, let's look at how other beloved shows handled final season deaths. Now you can't predict Stranger Things deaths without looking at the broader pattern of how television shows end. Game of Thrones killed basically everyone in its final season. Major characters, fan favourites, people we'd followed for years. The body count was absurdly high, and honestly, it felt excessive. Breaking Bad took the opposite approach. The protagonist died which felt inevitable given Walter White's arc, but several major characters survived. The Walking Dead has killed off so many main characters over the years that by the final season, half the original cast was already gone. Lost protected some favourites while killing others in ways that felt either earned or arbitrary, depending on who you ask. Buffy the Vampire Slayer did the sacrificial hero death and resurrection, giving Buffy multiple endings. The pattern across television is that final seasons are brutal. Shows either go for maximum carnage or surprising restraint. There's rarely a middle ground. The bittersweet ending has become trendy, which usually means some characters die while others get happy endings. That seems likely for Stranger Things. Some will survive to build new lives, others will sacrifice themselves for that future. The question is whether Stranger Things will follow horror genre rules, where survival is rare and death is expected, or coming-of-age genre rules, where the kids grow up and move on but stay alive. The show has always straddled both genres, which makes prediction difficult. Of course, Game of Thrones killed basically everyone, and the ending was controversial. Not because of the deaths, but because they felt rushed and unearned. Breaking Bad's ending was widely praised because Walter White's death felt inevitable and right. The execution matters more than the body count. Stranger Things has generally been good at earning its emotional moments, but Season 5 is where they have to prove they can stick the landing. Unlike Game of Thrones, Stranger Things knows how to land an ending. Probably. Hopefully. I'm manifesting. To be honest, I think Stranger Things will fall somewhere in the middle. High body count, but not everyone. The core kids will mostly survive, but they'll lose people around them. Steve, Nancy, maybe Max, possibly Murray. Characters whose deaths will hurt but serve the story. Does Stranger Things owe us a happy ending? That's the real question. After 4 seasons of trauma and loss and fighting, do these characters deserve to just be kids again? Or is the point that you can't go back, that fighting monsters changes you permanently? Final seasons are brutal, but they're also where shows prove whether they understood their own stories. The Duffer Brothers have one shot to stick the landing, which brings us to the end of tonight's predictions, my dear friends. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's morbid predictions. Honestly, I'm not ready to say goodbye to these characters. Steve, Max, Will, all of them. They've been part of my life since 2016, and the thought of Season 5 being the end is already emotional, without adding death predictions into the mix. If I had to rank the highest probability deaths, Steve at 60%, Max at 55%, Nancy at 50%, Murray at 70%, and Will at 40%. But honestly, I hope I'm wrong about all of them, except maybe Murray. Sorry, Murray. When Season 5 drops, we'll do a follow-up video revisiting these predictions and seeing how spectacularly wrong or depressingly right I was. Drop your predictions in the comments. Who do you think is dying? Who do you think is safe? Let's suffer together. But until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.